Thank you. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call to order the budget meeting of the Board of Education and invite everyone to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We are expecting that Dr. Britton will be joining us online this evening as he is under the weather. Can we make sure that Charles is with us and that we can hear him and he can hear us?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Charles, are you there?
I can hear you guys. Are you here? Can you hear me? Hello? Oh. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Oh, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, there we go. All right, everyone.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Next down.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Stacy. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. On to public comment, and first I would invite anyone who wishes to address the board with us in person. If you'd like, just please state your name and address for the record, and we ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, is this good?
Yep, perfect.
All right, hi, my name is Julie McGovern and I'm at 113 Mashamatic Trail. I'm a town resident, parent to 2 Valley View students, and the district multilingual learner teacher. I was the first full-time ML teacher hired in October 2022. Since starting, I have built and created many structures for the program as a de facto ML program coordinator. I have a growing caseload of 49 identified ML students that each require unique targeted language instruction. Students have language learning plans aligned to the state English language proficiency standards, targeting the skills they need to be successful in school. We all saw Eric's presentation last week, identifying ML students as a high-risk group. Let's talk more about this and pull ML a seat at the table. ML instruction is tier 1. It is a core part of the instructional plan for students that qualify. Federal and state guidelines recommend instructional minutes to deliver targeted English language instruction. For example, a newcomer learning beginner English is recommended to receive 1 hour daily of English instruction. For an intermediate student, the range is 3 to 5 days a week for 30 to 45 minutes. Our district has 1 certified teacher trying to provide these hours to 49 students across 5 schools. When an ML student is struggling, the ML teacher needs a seat at the table as part of the conversation to determine how and if language is a factor. Our district has 20 out of 49 ML students currently identified as special education or in the referral process. That's 41%. The district average is 21%. That's 20 PPT meetings throughout the year for 1 ML teacher. In addition to the SRBI meetings for the many ML students identified for tier 1 and tier 2, and tier 3 interventions. Another underutilized role of the ML teacher is to take a seat at the table, to collaborate with grade level teams and PLCs. All ML students take grade level content courses and should have linguistic support within that area. 1 specialist for 13 grade levels. I'm speaking today to encourage the superintendent and the board to protect this full-time TESOL position. It is not a proposed cut. However, there is a need for more ML staffing to cover these instructional minutes and ensure a fair and equitable education for this population. Throughout my time growing and building the program, I have built positive relationships with students and their families. 1 conversation with a secondary student stuck with me. I was checking in on their school year and they told me that I've encouraged them to feel like speaking another language is cool and that being multilingual will empower them. And that's what is at the heart of the program, lifting up the multilingual population and providing ML students a seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, administrators, and community members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Michelle Ignatowicz. I am the Portland High School art teacher. When I first started at Portland High, I never imagined how deeply connected I would become to the school and its community. Over the past 2 years, Portland High has not only been my workplace, but also my home. It is a privilege to teach here, and I'm incredibly grateful for the support I have received from my colleagues, students, and administrators. During my time here, I have worked diligently to build meaningful relationships with my students and to create a safe, nurturing environment in the art room, one where students feel valued and empowered to express themselves. I feel this is particularly meaningful for neurodivergent students, new to district students, ML students, and students who may struggle with traditional instruction cognitively and/or behaviorally. For some of my students, this may be the only area where they feel that they excel. Last spring, we saw a significant increase in student interest in our courses. Enrollment requests supported 11 sections of classes compared to the 8 unfilled sections we had the spring before I started. Only 8 of these were able to be run due to the limitations of the 0.6 position. I've continued to build relationships and a love of art, and I expect even more growth for the 25-26 school year. I fear that without an increase to my position, many students will be turned away again. As we look to the future, I envision the art program as a hub of creativity, innovation, problem solving, and self-expression. Whether through painting, drawing, ceramics, or an advanced course like AP Art, we offer students opportunities to develop not only their artistic skills, but also their confidence and sense of self. Adding AP Art to our course offerings would elevate the program further, providing students with the opportunity to pursue college-level coursework while still in high school. This would challenge advanced art students to refine their skills, develop a comprehensive portfolio, and prepare for post-secondary opportunities in the arts. While the art program is flourishing, this year has brought personal challenges for me. Following my divorce, I'm now a single mother, and the financial realities of living on a 0.6 FTE salary has become increasingly difficult. With prorated health benefits taking a significant portion of my paycheck, it has become clear that my current position is no longer sustainable for me. I love Portland High, and I see myself here long-term. I'm deeply committed to the school and its students, and I believe that the growth of the program reflects the value I bring to the community. That's why I'm respectfully requesting an increase to my position. Full-time role would allow me to meet my financial needs while continuing to give my full energy and focus to our students and to the program's success, and would also support students in taking the classes that they desire. As we look ahead to the 25-26 school year, I'm excited about the possibilities that lie before us. Together, we can foster creativity, curiosity, and excellence in the arts and empower our students to reach their full potential. Thank you for your time, support, and dedication to our school and its programs. I look forward to working together to ensure the continued success of the art program at Portland High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online who is looking to address the board at this point in time?
Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Can hear you.
Hi, this is Alicia Holloway, and I live at 24 Foley Road in town. I'm just wanted to comment and to give my support and to encourage the board to support, if at all possible, including as many special ed positions as we can in this coming budget. I would be remiss as a special ed teacher in town myself if I didn't advocate for these positions. Special ed teachers and paraprofessionals alike, they all contribute to the solid programming, the support for our most vulnerable population. Any consideration of cuts in this area would dramatically impact the students themselves. As when I first started in Portland, I had a very large caseload. It just so happened that it was, you know, that type of that year. And it was extremely challenging as we got into more and more numbers being added to the caseload to sufficiently meet the needs of all the students on the caseload. As caseloads increase, there's only one person filling that position, right? So there's only that amount, there's less and less time that can be devoted to the students themselves. So any time that we take positions away, it just means added numbers to caseloads. So it stretches the time of the staff that we have, and we have incredible staff. We have an incredible special ed department, and I would hate to have any of that be diminished, or the budget would be balanced on the back of those really vulnerable population and those students. So just wanted to voice my support. If at all possible, we can keep any special ed positions in place continuing for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Is there anyone else with us online who wishes to address the board? Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our only item of old business, which is continued discussion of the 2025-26 superintendent of schools proposed budget. So, Charles, I think we were intending to kind of pick up where we left off, I believe, with student services. Do you want to
Right.
pick up where we left off?
Joe, let me just double check. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. And I'm sorry I'm not there, but for your sake, I'm glad I'm not there because nobody wants what I've been fighting for the past 3 days. Trust me. So yeah, where we ended up was we were going through my transmittal letter, and we were up to the student support services page. So maybe if you want to flip to that, and then I'll just kind of walk you through student support services, facilities, curriculum instruction technology, central office. Then we'll pivot to the capital budget requests, and then I do want to spend some time reviewing all of the grant funded positions and where the funding for those are going. I don't think it'll take quite as long as it did Tuesday night, I'm hoping. But my goal is to get through these things, take any input you have about what you might like to see us change and adjust, with the ultimate goal of bringing you something hopefully you can approve at our meeting next Tuesday. That sound about right to everyone?
That sounds like a good plan.
All right, so under student support services, we're not recommending any changes there. You can sort of see that we have starting with our pupil personnel director and her administrative assistant. We added the van drivers. That doesn't reflect yet our discussion about adding the third van. That staffing would increase if we're headed down the road of a third van. Otherwise, we have all of our in-house support programs at each of the schools, contracted services, support for the 22 outplaced students, and various transportations included within Sarah's budget. And she's also there too. Don't forget, it's also guidance, nursing, and then all of our direct clinical supports. And this does reflect some of the changes we made, specifically adding an OT in-house. So we're not doing that as a contracted service. It assumes we're going to be able to maintain speech and language in-house, also our BCBA support in-house. So that at this point, and Sarah, please come up, feel free to come up to the microphone and correct me if I'm wrong, likely the only contracted service we'd be having for next year is PT. So
Come up to the podium, Charles. I think Sarah's gonna jump in here.
right, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah.
Yep, I think we just missed one. So right now for contracted services, we do have a part-time PT. We cannot sustain a full-time physical therapist here. We just don't have the numbers. That person's working about 2 days a week, contracted with Cheshire Fitness. We also added a 0.4 speech and language pathologist this year over the summer. The reason being that, as you all know, we have 2 full-time SLPs in district right now. In one position, we had, 3 to 4 people leaving every single year because the caseloads were astronomically high. So we added a 0.4 this year contractor to pick up some of the secondary hours. And that has made the load significantly more manageable for our 2 full-time folks. And my intention is to keep that. I've spoken with our speech pass, and really, if we didn't have that, they would like even more, honestly, but we would be at really, a not clinically supported level of case management. And I'm sensitive to all the costs we incurred last year when we had all of the contracted service doing compensatory. So for folks who don't know, if kids are missing their services because someone has resigned, we still owe the kids those services. So we had to bring in multiple contractors at an escalated rate to cover all those and, catch all the kids up. So I'd like to keep that, and that is in that contract service line.
Sarah, can I ask about the 0.4 contracted hours? When we were having to contract for, it was for occupational therapy, we were budgeting for a certain number of hours, and then we were actually being billed a considerably higher rate. When we say 0.4 SLP, are we actually talking about 0.4 SLP, or is it possible that it will become?
So it would be a conversation with, the agency that we're contracting with. I do have concerns that our numbers will rise higher, and that might be flexible. We have monthly billing check-ins. I approve all of their time cards, so there is, a management aspect. But I know when I met with our SLPs, their request was at least a 0.6, if not a 0.8. I'm not really sure we can support that in this, budget season, but at least a 0.4. And if, we're able to make other savings throughout the year, that would be one of my priorities to add more to that. Because I think it's been enormous change this year that we have kids fully covered. We're not contracting for compensatory service. We have continued service and not multiple resignations in that area.
If we get to the point where we're talking about a need for 0.6 or 0.8, at that point, does it start to become a conversation of whether it starts to make more sense to try and find somebody in-house rather than continuing to contract for those hours?
I think it does. It's a challenge of how someone would want to do it. A part-time position, you do have folks that will set up like their own LLC, and they would set a rate, kind of like our old OT, 5 years ago did that. It'd be worth looking into. If we wanted to do that, I will say contracted rates, obviously they have to make some money on their business. They are typically significantly higher than what the clinicians being paid. That was the OT, that was the piece too, of we were paying far more than, it would cost to have that service in-house. So I think it becomes a conversation, but I wouldn't say it is right now in our current budget environment.
Okay. Thanks.
You want me to stay here, or should I?
Maybe stay here.
Okay.
Charles, did you want to continue?
Well, are there any other questions for Sarah? Okay, hearing none. So the next item there is our curriculum instruction and technology budget, starting with the director of curriculum instruction and technology. So that position, as of tomorrow, is going to be vacant. I'm going to be engaging the board, and I've already started some informal conversations about how we might restructure that position. I'm not prepared to talk about those yet. This is all sort of in the very initial phases, but the budget right now, as it is, includes funding to replace that position as it is currently designed. But it's worth a conversation as we consider the unique nature of curriculum instruction and technology, and look into the future how we might refine that role and otherwise contemplate it differently. So I'm going to be talking to the personnel committee about that, and like I said, I've already had a few initial conversations, but the current the budget I'm proposing you does contain funding to replace the position as is. We also have 1 level 1 technician, 2 level 2 technicians, and then funding for generally all of the hardware, software, professional development that will allow us to continue to provide the services we're providing. The one exception here, the big jump in this, of course, is the Chromebooks, right? That, as a reminder, we need to get back to LEA funding for a Chromebook replacement cycle. We have been able to fund those through COVID relief funding and connectivity grant funding. That grant funding is no longer available. So my proposal does come with a request to purchase all rising 5th and 9th grade students a Chromebook that would be under warranty for 4 years, and then reallocate the Chromebooks we collect from the 8th graders and seniors back to students in grades 3 and 4. And then I think we have to have a broader conversation about K2 and, our desire, I think, to, begin to limit screen time. I think we honestly have to take a look at how often our kids at those ages are on screens, what they're using the screens for. But certainly I wouldn't recommend that we do a one-to-one device at K1 or 2. I know I shared with you tonight, Megan asked for an overview of our current Chromebook inventory. If you check your inbox, that should be there now. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions about our funding and recommendations to support curriculum instruction and technology.
Charles, I was curious if you had a chance to explore the leasing option that I mentioned Tuesday evening, and if so, what you found?
Not yet, so
Okay.
I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And then I just have a concern, a lot of these are, the cybersecurity, may not be in effect on some of the computers. That could be problematic. And then some of the, cybersecurity, some of the warranties are expiring in 2020. I'm trying to see where I was here. Some of them in 2026, which means we'll be, basically, we've got some old models, I guess, it looks like, with some expirations. 6/24, actually, they're out of warranty now.
So are you talking about student devices or staff
I'm
devices?
talking about, yes, middle school, high school, stragglers and reserves, some of them are at Valley View. I think,
So those are, you're looking at the devices that are deliberately out of warranty that have, so that,
the warranty ended in June.
right. So because the plan that Charles has put forward is a plan in which when we purchase a round of devices for 5th grade and for
I
9th grade students,
understand the plan.
that there's they are under a 4-year warranty. So the second half of that, Meg, is that the devices that get pushed down are held in reserve for someone's got a broken device that's under repair or whatever. Those devices are not under warranty.
I
The
understand
devices
that.
for 3rd and 4th grade, I'm gonna make sure we all understand,
Yeah.
the devices in 3rd and 4th grade are definitely not under warranty any longer,
Correct.
but there are lots of them. So when they break, there should be backups. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, at some point, they reach a point where they're just beyond usable. They're just clunkers at that point. But, being a year or two out from under warranty, they're still serviceable. The big problem becomes in terms of their operating systems and whether they can provide things like the kiosks that we use for testing, which is a problem we're running into now at Gildersleeve. But if we begin this replacement cycle committing to purchase 5th and 9th graders, one under 4-year warranty, the Chromebooks that travel the most from students grades 5 through 12 will be under warranty and will have an appropriately updated system. But you are correct. This system does envision that the Chromebooks the 3rd and 4th graders have will not be under warranty, but will only be out of warranty for a year or two before they're essentially totally recycled, just, back to the recycling bin, right? I'm not sure if I answered the question the right way.
Yeah, more or less. I think, this is a good overview and I think it's a good place to start. I'd like to see a little bit more comprehensive, detail going forward, because we are still looking at computers that are too old at the middle school and high school when they're, required to do testing. So, thank you for getting this together as quickly as you did. And obviously we have to, replace or we have to buy 5th and 9th grade laptops this year, but I think going forward, we should probably look at different kind of buying cycle or leasing cycle. And do it early rather than during budget month. If that makes sense.
Meg, did you have because you raised a question earlier about cybersecurity. Did you have a
Just that I'm wondering if that is a problem, is that problematic for using computers on our internet connections.
Yeah, so cybersecurity is always a problem as, I'm going to be talking to you next week about the Power School hack. Cybersecurity is as critical now as ever before. Students are always, unfortunately, finding workarounds through the devices that we have, the security systems we have on our devices and even on our network. It's a big issue, Meg, no doubt. To the extent that that also talks to the older a device that you have, the more vulnerable that device is. The newer devices come with the most recent software updates that create the most cyber secure profiles. But even those, as soon as the systems are released, there are hackers or bad actors out there that are looking to compromise things. That said, I will say I feel like our systems are as secure as they possibly could be. That's not saying they're 100% secure, otherwise students might not, or anybody might not be able to access or use them in inappropriate ways. But we're doing the best we can to prevent that through our filtering systems and then respond to those things through our reaction when we discover that it's been happening. But again, I don't want to paint a picture that it's 100% secure. I'm trying to paint a picture that it's as secure as it can be in an insecure cyber world.
And that's really just what I want to make sure of, because we don't want to be in a position where we're hostage to some nefarious group of hackers. So, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
We carry cybersecurity insurance, Charles?
We do. It's called Cowbell.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, most recently, we're all in the process of updating our devices with something called two-way authentication, which is what we had to do in order to maintain that insurance policy.
Good.
I got a notification about that today.
I did too.
Probably all did.
So,
Timely. Were there any other questions for Charles about curriculum instruction and technology budget, about Chromebook purchases, hardware purchases? We've sort of just barely begun to touch on the conversation about software. Can you kind of touched on that at last meeting? Were there more questions in this moment, or we're gonna save those?
I don't know. I think more of a comment, or I guess a question for Charles. Just hearing the conversations. I know we all have that feeling that people are always the most important aspect of the budget, having enough staffing. And hearing the concerns regarding staffing, is there a way we can look at the software or the technology, and can we sacrifice and make cuts in this area to help with the staffing concerns? I don't have a good understanding of like what would happen if we didn't get new Chromebooks for the fifth graders, the rising fifth graders. What would that look like? What would the savings be around that? Is that a possibility? And then, yeah, the other software items, is there a way? I know we had talked about those level 3. I had touched on that. Can we cut back? Can we look at, if we were to say to the staff in the schools, hey, if you had to give up a software program in order to help with our staffing, could you do without X, Y, and Z? Would they be amenable to that? Is that feasible?
Yeah, so let me respond to one part of that. When Eric put together the spreadsheet that you see, and he's identified the ones that are like the level 3 ones, I asked him to prioritize our software so that, from most important to ones that are important but less important. And then we've given them cuts already. And Stephanie, I'm not sure if he's provided you the how much that's cuts for, but I believe, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, I've already taken out all of those software requests that were identified as most mission critical. Stephanie, do you have the email he sent back to you identifying?
It's on the spreadsheet. It's the ones that are in green. It says new software. I apologize if the coloring is
It's a
terrible.
little tricky to read, isn't it?
the print.
I know. So, and you'll see he highlights in the top the green, and so those were the cuts that he made. So it's 1,384.53 that's already been cut. Out of 31,384.53.
I thought I thought that that's the amount that was added to the request, that that's
Right.
the new software.
Right, so that's what he asked for and Charles cut it off.
All of that
So-
green was cut.
Correct. If you see up
Okay.
top, you see the green with the dashes through them, that's all those. It's very small. I
Okay,
apologize.
okay.
So within, under, all the different line items, you'll see the first one up top is Brain Pop, which is the first line there, and it's crossed out at 0.
Gotcha.
Dreambox.
Lexia.
This now, I can't even read through that. Lexia. Text help.
Okay, so the box in green was already cut from the request.
Yes.
I think we.
So those were included originally, and then when we started making cuts, those were cut already.
Just out of curiosity, what is text help? Dash sped. Text
Um,
help will rewrite.
I think, is
with
Eric
Bob.
there with you guys, by the way? Is Eric in the room? Okay,
No,
No,
and I'm just curious, like, is that something that then teachers have to manually do, or like we have to purchase additional?
No, so
Like,
Google
what?
Read Write is text help and they actually have just been bought out again. And now I think they're like Energy or something. They keep getting bought out by different companies and rebranding, but that is on all Chromebooks in Portland. If the Chromebook is one of the newer ones that'll run the extension, that's kind of another issue we're running into. That's text to speech and speech to text. So a student who has a reading based disability clicks the icon, highlights the text, it reads it all back to them. They also can speak into the Chromebook and it'll type for them. So that's an extension on Chrome that we have to pay for as an add-on.
So what are we doing as a district in the absence of that software?
Yep, so we're putting it in the IDEA budget.
Okay.
Under the set aside funds. That's in my narrative. And I can speak about the set aside when we
Okay.
go into grants, but that will continue being in Portland. We put it under the set aside because it is something that's used in intervention frequently. It's not just for special education students. Really, everyone has it on their Chromebooks, if the Chromebook supports it.
I think what I was trying to call your attention to is as we've prioritized the software, any software that isn't most essential to teaching and learning and the operations of the district has already been cut. The ones that are left are the ones that Eric and the tech team and leadership team has identified as those are the ones that are most critical to support both teaching and learnings and general operations.
did you have a follow-up?
No, I don't.
Other questions about the curriculum instruction and technology budget? All right, Charles, I think we can.
Okay.
Facilities.
So next one then is facilities, and for there we have our custodians at each of our buildings, and then we have a floater custodian. And as a reminder, we added the floater custodian because it's pretty much cost neutral. Either we're going to have that other position or we're going to pay the overtime, right? So that floater custodian is there for us when our custodians are taking sick time or vacation time or other time. And so that's very helpful to have a person doing that as opposed to contracting with a sub-service or a custodian sub-service. And we found that it's like Stephanie can give us the exact breakdown, but it's not that much more expensive when you peel out the overtime to pay for that floater custodian position. Otherwise, within the facilities is that 9.6% increase. We should be an awful lot higher on that. I'm sure Bob is there and shaking his head if he's in the room. That we're holding it together. We are very much counting on some support with what I hope will be a positive next shot at a bonding referendum. But our schools are very old. They require an awful lot of work to keep going. They're very inefficient, and Bob and the custodians do everything they can to keep them running. But I just have to say we're on borrowed time before major systems start to fail.
So could I point out one thing though, Charles?
Yes, of course.
So it is 44003, but that is not all just Bob. You'll see Bob's portion of it on his tab. And it refreshed my memory when I looked at it. So the schools, there is other accounts that do have repairs and maintenance. Like in the music department, if they have to repair instruments. So that's the global piece of it. Bob's piece is actually only an increase of $28,400 over last year. And that's on his tab,
It's under building and ground.
under building and grounds, and you'll see what portion of that is his. And the difference is within the schools. I just want to make sure I said that, you know, so everybody understands that he's not getting the total that's there. He's only getting 222,988 in repairs and maintenance.
Which doesn't quite restore us to 22, 23 actuals, but
Yeah, no, that budget has taken a cut for several years in a row.
well, let's be fair that in last year's budget, every department in every school took a cut across the board. It wasn't just repairs and maintenance. That was a challenge for everyone. But yeah, your point is well made there. You know, we need to get some funds back in that line. Are there questions for Bob? Are there questions for Charles about buildings and grounds budget? Facilities? Nope. Okay.
All right, so next one that I have is our central office, and you see the 4 positions there. But this also includes, of course, all of our liabilities, insurance, food services, transportation. Stefan, did you have a chance to check? I know it came in late, and thank you, Meg, for pointing that out to us. Are we funded well enough for the magnet school tuition? I didn't know if that was going to be something we were concerned about.
Well, I budgeted as if it would be the 58% cap. I did not budget full.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, just to let everybody know, there's a concern that if funding isn't provided in this legislative session, we might have to increase the amount we pay for the magnet school tuition, but we don't know what that would be yet.
Would say, we won't, we won't know whether or not the 40 million from last year is gonna be in the governor's budget this year. It may have been a one-time deal. They did, hold your horses here, $340 million in investments on COVID fund was found to be in the accounts of the state. $340 million from investment that it made from investments of COVID funds. That could pay for a lot of things that we have been worried about. If the state wants to let that money go, or if the federal government wants to claw it back, that could happen too. But I think we should budget for the full tuition amount based on what I heard yesterday at CREC. They're not 100% hopeful that that money will be restored.
I think what you're saying, Meg, is this might be another dice rolling moment, right?
It is, and I think we should plan to pay the full amount. And if we make an adjustment later on in March or April, then good for us, we'll save.
So we usually typically pay for the magnet schools out of open choice funds that we receive. So if anything, it would just be less that we have
Yes.
towards the positions.
Okay.
So it usually works itself out.
It will work itself.
So it's not actually in LEA, it's within the grant.
Okay, and that's fine. If it's in grant funds, that's fine. But at least we now are aware that that could be a significant change.
But Stephanie, just to confirm, you're saying it wouldn't affect the LEA budget?
No,
Okay. And it's
Well,
not,
unless we're short in open choice,
right,
then it would. But not gonna look, we haven't yet. But that's the only way that it would.
Right, and we're gonna go through in a moment here, all of the grant funded positions. I think what we're saying here is that if the magnet school tuition came in higher and we had to eat into more open choice, some of the positions that we have in open choice would either have to be cut or moved over into the LEA.
And in fairness, it's not just the tuition piece. I mean, I only can base it off of students that are enrolled right now. A pre-K kid could, decide to go to magnet school. Anybody within the school year can go. I see who's graduating, that's easy to tell, but I don't know who's gonna choose. So I kind of have to base it off of that.
that makes sense, right? It's based off the.
You only have about 8 or 9. It's not many.
Well, for some districts, it was a huge savings.
We had a lot more in the past, so I mean, students are staying in-house now, because there were more. Or
So we'll just keep an eye on that.
Are there any questions or questions for me or Stephanie about the central office expenses and everything that we cover in that line?
I don't think so, Charles. I think you can keep going.
Good, okay, I'll keep going then. So, the next two sections I have, we're gonna cover, shortly. I have listed out there all of the grants we receive, and I have in the back of your, budget books, a description that I want to go through with you of how we're spending that money and for what. So I have another letter for you on that. And then right after that I have the capital budget. So would we be comfortable then jumping to the capital? We'll do capital first and then go over all of the grants? Does that sound like a good plan?
Sure, that's fine.
So if you jump under the tab capital, you'll see there's another letter from me to Laurel, which has the 4 bullets, five bullets, beginning with duct cleaning, air quality, HVAC upgrades, and backflow prevention. I just give you a heads up, I did share this letter with the strategic planning committee because it reflects what I hope the town and you will consider. This is sort of not only identifying the many capital improvement needs we have, but it's sort of a concept. And it goes like this. If you flip over that page and you look at it's titled bond debt service. Does everybody see that page titled bond debt service?
Yep.
What that is that's what the town has been paying every year in the budgets since 2012 through to present to pay off the secondary school. So the good news moment here is congratulations, Portland. This is the last year that you have to pay for the secondary school. As soon as you make that final payment this year in the amount of $456,750, you now own the secondary school. So you have the deed. It's like when you pay off your house or your car, you no longer have to pay off the loan. That $456,750 is now there. It won't have to be spent next year. It's in this year's budget. I would encourage the board and the Board of Selectmen to consider, instead of taking that money and applying it towards the operating budget, keep it in the budget, not as bond debt service, but move it over to capital. If the town decided to do that, we could then have access to that $456,750 to start paying for some of the work we know needs to be done on our infrastructure. Specifically, I've worked with Bob, and if you add up the 5 bullets there, you'll notice it comes to round about 456,000. If we did that next year, we'd be able to chip away at some of those secondary school needs that we know we have to do because they've been identified by Sightlines, identified by Fryer, and we live with them. Right? And Bob is there, he can give you more details. But specifically, one of the biggest challenges we faced at the secondary school has to do with the HVAC system. And we've talked about how the system was designed with 2 pipes versus 3 pipes, and that especially when the air conditioners run, it just pumps out very humid, moist, cold air that is not the best. And we have to run these industrial strength dehumidifiers all summer. It's just not a good system that needs to be addressed. In the past, I've shared with you a plan, and thank you, Bob, for coming up with it. We're so lucky to have him. He's brilliant. That instead of the many millions of dollars to make the system the way it should have been done when the school was built, but instead begin replacing the air handling units with dehumidification systems and ionization systems to pump out appropriate air for the secondary school. The idea is that if we can convince our community that investing that $456,000 next year, we can start working on these projects. Then, of course, longer term, if the community supports a school consolidation from 3 to 2 elementary schools, we know the community didn't support a consolidation from 3 to 1, but the Strategic Planning Committee is working and may convince the community to support a consolidation from 3 to 2 schools. If we consolidate to 2 schools, I project we could save approximately $725,000 from the operating budget. That then could give us $456,000 to work with next year, and then the year after that, $1,181,000, and then the year after that, $1,181,000. At the end of that third year, if we convince our community that consolidating schools is a good idea, that's around the time we'd have to start paying back the note or the bond on the new referendum, at which time you could take that $1,181,000 and use it as the principal or the funding source, pay off that new note. So I know it's a lot to digest, but I see this as a pretty fair-minded approach to help us start addressing the capital needs at the secondary school and identifying a funding source that we could use to offset the cost of new bonding, which we know we desperately need in all 3 of our elementary schools. So let me stop there. That was kind of a long-winded explanation, but I figured that was easier than just reading you my letter, and see if you had any questions either on the concept that I offer or the projects that we're recommending in year 1.
Is this all off the top of your head, or have you consulted with financial planners in coming up with this? Just curious. Besides Stephanie, like, are there boards at the state or something that give you some of these ideas? Just curious.
Yep. So the bond debt service, that came from Tom. That's in the town's budget. We have worked closely with, his name is David Eisenthal. He's the town's financial planner. And he's given us a sense, like we did with the consolidation that failed in November, that how much that would cost. So we have worked with the financial planners on certain aspects of these. Generally, though, I just want to say that I would love to take credit for this idea as being all mine, but it is not. This is actually what the Facility Study Committee came up with in terms of their proposals. That
to me is a good thing, because that to me just makes it feel like it's a consensus. It's not just one person's idea. And that's why I was going to get that out in the open, because I think that's really good that you're collaborative that way. And just only because I've heard, rumblings that he's trying to run the show, and it's not that way. He's being collaborative. He's working with a lot of other people to come up with these ideas. So that's why I just wanted to make that visible. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And this really was, if we go back and look at the work of the Facility Study Committee, we were understanding that the committee was understanding that the secondary school had significant work that needs to be done. But the most pressing work is at our elementary schools. So it was a pretty clever conversation and idea that came out of that committee, that it was just focus on the elementary schools, secure bonding for that, and then use the savings from a consolidation, to fix the secondary school. That was a great idea out of the committee. I thought that was a really thoughtful solution. And what that letter that you have for me is sort of the reality or the fiscal implications of what that idea was. That, hey, don't just take the savings from when the secondary school is paid off, and give it back towards the operating budget, but instead use it, like reapply it towards capital. Because I'll just remind everybody, there are two things that I've heard very clearly as I've been engaged in this process. And one was, we can't take on any new bonding until the secondary school is paid off. I heard that very clearly from a lot of people in town. And I agree with that, you know. But here we are, as of this year, we're paid off. And two, how then can we get to a reality where capital projects are funded? Because unfortunately, you know, every year that I've gone to the committees with capital requests, the strategic planning committee, the long-term planning committee that looks at them, they look at me and they're like, these are great ideas, Charles. We know we need them, but we don't have any money for it. And capital is one of those areas that gets cut first. And, you know, that's part of the reason why we've kind of ended up in the pickle we are now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that it's important for us to have this conversation as a board now, but then to have this conversation with our first selectman, with our board of selectmen about how we can preserve these funds in the budget to not only start making some strides towards capital improvements at the secondary schools, but to make sure that there's funding allocated in the budget to pay, to eventually have a bonding plan in place so that we can make the improvements that are desperately needed at the elementary schools. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in this recommendation, Charles.
Thank you.
I have some questions about the the list that you'd be proposing as our capital plan to tackle in year one if we were able to preserve these funds, and that maybe Bob could speak to this a little bit. I'm curious, you know, most of the items on this list are related to HVAC and air. And I'm curious if these are items that, you know, we've been keeping our eye on the state HVAC funds. We did not have the funds to make us eligible to go after those grants when they were available the first couple rounds. We don't know if there will be another round, but I think we're all kind of hopeful that there will be. Would these be items that if that grant came around again, would these be items that would be eligible for that grant potentially, that we could maybe achieve matching funds from the state to make our money go a little further?
Yeah, some of those are the rooftop units that are identified in there to be replaced would be 2 of about 14 that would be on that list. So those are our oldest and most troublesome units. So that's why I put those into our first round to be able to try to get those up. They'll be replaced with the dehumidification units. The ionization system is included in there as well to get that up and running and in place so I can start to chip away at our new state law regarding our air quality in our schools. So I had an awful lot to look at there, and I tried to pick out those items that would fit into the $455,000. That would be probably the easiest to get done in a period of time that I could do that in the summer months and not interfere with the school, as well as get the best bang for the buck up front. The following, if it continues that way, which I think is a wonderful program, to utilize that until we have that money to use towards that debt services, could incorporate so much more. And I would build off of that list right there and continue to make improvements. Now, if the grant comes back and it's allowed, we could use some of those leverage funds towards the matching funds to, you know, spend the $1 million and get $700,000 back. So we have a lot of opportunity there. I do hope the grant, we missed it for a few years there. I don't know what's left in that kitty and where it's going to go or not go. But I think there's a big push for it to come back, at least for one final year. So we'll still be able to go after that. Not only here, but we can probably incorporate some of that into our strategic plan for the other schools. So it's certainly not a loss, but I think that list that you have is the best I can do in the 455, because if you go through the other items, they're pretty extensive as far as cost.
You mentioned, I heard mentioned at the building and grounds committee, the light board at the secondary school. Is that in maintenance? Is that in one of the funds?
So you're talking about our Windows 95 based lighting system here that
Yeah.
we work on
That's the
each and
one.
every day. It's been in capital for many years at the cost of about $300,000. Unfortunately, we've had enough issues with it where I've had to make some permanent changes, and pull portions of this school off of the system. And put them on, kind of going old school, but it's new technology. We put them on timers that we can certainly maintain ourselves. We just finished a project. We've done the entire exterior of the school. I'm trying to limit that cost. I do believe the interior of the school does need to be on controls. So I'm hoping that that price will be cheaper as we move forward, but that will be part of the money that we need either moving forward in the next few years with additional funding and capital before we have that bond requirement, or that'll be part of some of the money that we'll have to add to the bond for the secondary school.
I didn't see it when I looked quickly through the capital request. And then at some point you mentioned, and Charles mentioned, that the IT department is looking at a phone system upgrade for the district. And is that somewhere in capital, or is that in?
Yeah, so you have to look at capital in the broad terms. You'll see a lot of those numbers pushed out, but you'll see the
Right.
categories there, but it's in technology, the phones. Yeah, and that's something that's gonna be critical for, not a huge number, but it's pretty critical for this facility here.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, the other schools that we work on through that strategic plan and that bonding referendum have all that new technology. It doesn't exist today.
Over your highlighted numbers priorities. You know what? this
Yeah,
is?
so your yellows.
Yeah.
You'll see your yellows, but really the category that we're talking about now, the 455, is really under the secondary section. I did do some priorities under the other schools. If additional funding was made available, I would be trying to do some of those items as well.
But are one's highest priority?
The one's my highest,
Oh, thanks.
yes.
Are there other questions for Bob or for Charles about the proposed capital plans? Thanks, Bob.
And then one just vital thought before we jump to the grants on this is I at our meeting next Tuesday, I'm gonna bring to you a draft letter that I would love the board to consider to send to our state representatives and state senators. And in that, I would encourage us to advocate for increases in ECS funding, a stable approach to the excess cost reimbursement, and implore them to consider bringing back round 3 of those indoor air quality grants. We missed a real opportunity there, and I know that we couldn't do round 1 because it was rushed. We tried to get round 2 in, but it was just, again, we couldn't pull it off, and we were primed now for this round 3, but that was the unpleasant email they sent us in October saying there is going to be no round 3, and I'm a little frustrated by that, and I would like the board to consider, and I've already communicated that frustration in my conversations with some state reps. I would ask the board to consider signing off on a letter from us to say, bring round 3 back. The money was there. What did you do with it, people? We need that. And if we could do that, if that round 3 of indoor air quality grant funding came back, that $2 million could become $4 million, which would get us a huge way towards addressing the work that we know needs to be done. But again, I'll share a draft letter with you next week, and it might be some advocacy work you would consider.
Do you happen to know if any other school districts were also depending on round 3 that we could rally behind as well, in addition to?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know of several districts like Colchester who is very much enjoying the round 1 and 2 grant funding that they got. I'm reading about them in architecture firms they're hiring and work they're doing to reconfigure their indoor air quality systems. And like I said, I'm just disappointed that we're not there. We tried, but we just We just couldn't get it done.
These are competitive grants though, so we're competing against other schools. It's not like we can collaborate with other schools.
No, I think Angela meant collaborate in terms of like expressing
Expressing
collectively our
frustration.
frustration that round three wasn't offered.
Right,
Yeah.
and other schools were
Yeah.
anticipating it as well and having difficulty.
Yeah. I think I think that the answer is very likely that there are many other districts
Yeah,
that are in the
I'm
same
sure
boat.
there are.
Yeah,
And we should probably find out if there's a way, maybe Kate can help us somehow.
we can ask, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
But just something to think about. I'm gonna draft up a letter for you just to kind of share it with you. It'll be very professional and appropriate, of course, but you know, within it, if that round 3 of air quality grants came back, boy, we would be foolish if we didn't jump on it, because you know, we can turn a $1 million project into a $2 million project. Why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah. I know, I think that's gotta be kind of in our, I think it's a good idea to include that piece in the letter. I mean, I know we had discussed last week our frustration about the ECS formula and about our excess cost funding not coming through in the way that we'd anticipated. But I think including that piece is good too, because, you know, yeah, that really could help us frame what we ask for in our capital requests over the next couple of years, if another round or 2 of funding became available.
All right, then. So the last piece I have for you then is, if you go to the very end of your book, this is sort of new, but I know that it's always been kind of maybe not entirely clear the difference between LEA funding and then other funding. And again, LEA funding constitutes the local share and the excess cost. But we do and have access to several other funding sources from grants. And I wanted you to see those and what positions we are funding with those. Before I do, just one quick side note. Again, as far as our advocacy work, we advocate for our funding with our state reps. We may also want to keep an eye on Washington, right? That we know where President Trump is about to be sworn in. You know, I think regardless of how people voted or feel about him, we wish him all the success in the world. He is going to be our president, and a president's success is our nation's success. That said, I get very nervous when I hear about massive cuts that might be coming out of Washington, D.C., and would be very concerned about if those cuts fell on any one of these grants that I'm going to talk to you about. So the biggest federal grant that we get is our IDEA grant, and Sarah's still there. She can certainly come up and be prepared to talk to us. There's 2 different parts of IDEA. There's the 6111 grant for $288,000, and then there's the 619 grant for $10,248. And you see there the positions that those grant funds support. If you had any questions about what those grants are for, what IDEA is, or how we're allocating those funds, feel free to ask.
Sarah, we're shifting around what's being funded by IDEA this year, and I know you addressed this in your narrative a little bit, but would you just kind of give us a brief overview of the changes with
Sure.
what will be funded under IDEA and what has been moved out either into our LEA or just?
Yep. So the biggest change to IDEA is due to something called disproportionality. So every year the state takes all the data on all of the kids that we identify with disabilities, their race, their gender, what their disability category is, and they analyze the data. And they basically identify, are you disproportionate? So are you identifying too many students in any one category, basically? And they do it on a 3-year cycle. So they'll say, year 1, they say FYI district, you're identifying a disproportionate number of Hispanic students with autism, FYI. Year 2, they say the same thing. Hey, you're still doing this. You should address it. By year 3, it mandates that you have to set aside, it's called CSIS set aside funds, to address that disproportionality, and it cannot be for special education. It has to be for students who are not yet referred to special education. So Portland is in year 3 of disproportionately identifying Black students with learning disabilities. So some of the para cuts that Charles has spoken about are because I now have to take out of that IDEA grant and address that inequity, basically. So that's where the middle school math interventionist would come from. So if I were to do that, if I were to say, no, never mind, I'm not setting aside funds, we'd be ineligible for all of that, $300,000 by IDEA. So instead of paras and some of the other things that were in the section, it's going to go towards the math interventionist, a program called Just Words, that's for struggling readers who struggle with like phonics and decoding before they're in special education. And then one para that's going to solely support kids that are, pre-special education in tier 2 and tier 3, like an academic support para. But that's the big change that we are in year 3. So it's something to note. It's not a good thing, certainly, but I think setting aside some good funds for intervention is, a positive step, but it does impact some of those positions, and it did lead to at least 2 of the para cuts, essentially. Any other questions about IDEA?
Thank you, Sarah.
And then the next several here, again, also federal grants, are the Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV grants. And these we receive and allocate for different positions and professional development, and what else we have? Also different supplies. So again, I wanted you to take a look at how much we're anticipating to receive, keeping our fingers crossed that those funds stay whole. But should they be received in the amounts that we're anticipating, that's how we would allocate them.
You just mentioned Title I, II, and III. Was it also 4 as well?
And 4, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for that clarification.
Yeah, no, of course.
What's that all in total? Like about 400,000?
Do the quick math on that for us, Stephanie.
Are you talking about just the title grant?
All the federal funding that if it did get chopped off the block.
Including IDEA.
Yeah, what would it be?
550, 20,000 or something. Am I doing my math right there?
I know. She got your calculator.
Got your trusty calculator?
Yeah. About 454,000. Oh, I forgot Title III. Plus another 5,800. 475.
475. And if it did get chopped, well, I guess we wouldn't know when, but does it get funded July 1st typically, or how does that happen? Or does it?
I don't believe title will go away because title money is based off of your free and reduced, and you'll always have free and reduced students. So I don't think title money, IDEA is another question. I don't know about that. I don't think title money would ever go away.
But it does come from the feds.
So I'll keep going. So the next 2 big ones there, of course, are the funding we receive for our participation in the Open Choice program. That comes in the form of, we receive $10,000 per student, which is a bonus if we maintain 5% or more of our students as Open Choice students, and then the supplemental that we get. This is an important funding source for us. This does assume that we're going to have 58 Open Choice students in our schools next year. Of course, in the spring, I'll bring to you the seat declaration form, but there will be at least 58 students for whom we will open seats in order to hit these numbers.
And this is state funded.
State funded, yes.
And Stephanie, does this connect to what you were saying earlier about cost? So it seems like we've already allocated what these grants are covering. So if we did have an increased cost in magnet school tuition, would any of these line items or bullet points be cut or be affected rather?
Yes, but there's other smaller ones. So if you see the other services, there's some stipends that we kind of say, we do kind of put it in the budget, but if there's money in open choice, we move it over there. But we leave it as an option. That if there is extra funding, it does help us, but if it isn't there, at least we know it's in. And so the stipends usually enough would cover the difference.
Okay.
And then there's other times where I have more and I can move other stuff into there. And sometimes I move the tutors, as long as it has to do with giving students an education,
Mhm.
you can move it into open choice.
Okay.
Are there any questions about the open choice grants that we received?
The
Okay.
next one, this is a new one, the McKinney-Vento, and Sarah, if you're there, I know McKinney-Vento is a federal law. Is this McKinney-Vento grant, was this a state or federal grant? I'm sorry, I just don't know which.
No
level.
worries. So the McKinney-Vento grant is a state grant. It's a competitive grant. There's also one not listed there that we received. I think I remember telling you about it maybe August, September, which is a mental health grant, summer mental health supports. So that will carry us in for the summer. I don't think it's listed there, but yes, it's a competitive state grant that we get to support students who are unhoused. It's the transportation, it's supplies for them. We put interpreters under that too, because a lot of our McKinney-Vento families are actually Spanish-speaking families, so that's all under there.
Thank you. And then Perkins is federal, but we are in a consortium of towns that apply for and receive Perkins grants. But this would be specifically to support career and technical education at the high school and middle school. Okay, the state adult education grant, this funds are, again, we're in a consortium. We don't have an adult education program in Portland. Instead, we participate in the adult education program offered through Middletown. But we get these grant funds and it helps offset the costs for Portland residents who want to pursue programs that are offered through adult education. They can go across the bridge. I've actually been over there and visited. It's really nice program that they have right across the river. Medicaid reimbursement, if you have any questions about that, you can ask Stephanie or me, and I'll probably defer very quickly to Sarah. These are things that we can request reimbursement for OT in particular, some speech and language, but otherwise, ask for Medicaid reimbursement.
That amount is sort of to be determined based on the student services that are required, right?
It's on how it gets billed, who signs the waiver, because we can't put in for anybody that doesn't allow us to, so it varies, we're under this year, but we figured out a few things that didn't happen. That's why we kind of really push even our contractors to make sure you put in and bill for everything that you can, because it helps us in the end. But I mean, this last year, we got about $37,000 from Medicaid. We're a little short this year, so that's why I kind of went with the 20. I didn't want to go too high.
Yeah.
So this will help offset any, if any additional speech services come up. We usually use Medicaid and some of the IDEA funds to help. But we can tell by like April if we're going to start running out of money, and we'll dip into those accounts for that.
Then the next one here is something that certainly I think merits a little bit of a conversation, and that's the excess cost. So again, as a reminder, in this year's budget, Stephanie had put 70% as the placeholder. Obviously, a week ago Monday, we were disappointed when we got the email saying that you're only getting 62%. The superintendent's budget that you have in front of you has, again, a placeholder of 60%. 70, excuse me, right. We could reduce that to 60, which would, then if we got 62% next year, it would be a bonus. If we got 70%, it would be a big bonus. But if we did that it would increase the percent increase we'd be asking for from the town, or otherwise we'd have to offset it with more cuts. So this is a little stressful, and this is certainly, I think, when you see my draft letter that I'll share with you next Tuesday, going to be a big highlight that, yes, state, you should be funding these levels, funding excess cost at the levels in the tiers that you promised us. But even more importantly, you have to give us some certainty. We cannot find out in the middle of January that you're changing that number, especially if it's lower. If you want to change it higher, okay, I'll be in a good mood. But if you want to change it and make it lower, you're really jamming us up, because then I have to do some very disruptive things to our organization or run a deficit. So again, at that 70% number, we've taken 2 hits in the past couple of years. We're taking another chance. Stephanie, feel free to chime in, and you and I've had a lot of conversation about this. Are you prepared to make a recommendation that we adjust that number to the lower amount, or again, take the risk and hope our advocacy work this year pays off with more excess cost reimbursement next year and a better process that doesn't leave us shortchanged in the middle of January?
I mean, I don't think it's $144,000. We would have to increase it by. I can't recommend that.
If we were to just say that again, if we were to reduce the estimate reimbursement that we received from 70% down to 60%, we're talking about adding $144,000 to the budget.
And I put a little buffer in there because the threshold changes every year. So I said, I made a note, and a threshold increased to 98,000. It went from 93 to 96 from last year to this year. So I said, if we increase it to 98, the threshold, and down to 60%, it would be short 144,577. We can't.
Because we don't know what is in the hearts and minds of the legislators.
It just means, whether I start next year, I don't want to say freeze, but just knowing in the back of my mind, I have $144,000 I may have to come up with in January. And that's what I'm doing. I couldn't recommend that right now.
And and also to be clear, the placeholder of 70% is already a reduction from what we've been told we.
So if you look at 22, 23, 76.3 is what we should be getting.
That's what we should
That's
be
when they
getting.
went to that tiered system where the mid-tier, we should be getting 76.3. So it came the first year.
Yeah.
So that's why when we budgeted 75, we're like, okay, this is great.
Yeah.
Then we got 69. So then we went to 70, thinking we would get 69 again, and then we got 62.
And part of the problem was that there were so many more students requiring outplacement.
Well, and it was flat funded. It was flat funded from last year to this year, and so there's more need that has to get dispersed out.
So the pot was only so big, and when they split it up, that was what happened. Yeah, and I don't know what will happen this year.
No, but the only thing that is encouraging is that there is so much conversation happening at the legislature already this year. I mean,
absolutely.
session has just started, and it seems like the excess cost
The
is
two-
a hot topic at the
The
moment.
2 bills, Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1001 are both dealing with the excess cost. So we know that there are going to be conversations, but you know,
I don't understand the first sentence. I'm sorry. For current CSDE guidelines, the Portland Board of Education responsible for the first 4.5 times are per pupil expenditure. What does that mean?
That's the threshold I talk about, the 96,000. It's a calculation.
4.5, what is?
It's a calculation that they come up with. I don't know why. But so each year we get a per pupil expenditure that we spend as a whole, as a district per student. And then why these are multiplied 4.5, I don't know. And so that's how they come up with that number. And if you're a DCF placement state, was it what, 1%, 1.5%? It's a lot lower. The threshold is a lot lower if you have a DCF placement in your district. So I don't really have an answer. I don't know why. It's just a formula they come up with.
Just out of curiosity, how is the per pupil expenditure calculated?
So when I do my big state report, they take your total expenditure, so it includes all the federal dollars. And they divide it by how many pupils you have.
Okay.
And then that's.
So it's LEA plus grant.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, so in that example, I divided 25 million by 1225. It's 20,000 a student. So 4.5 times that would be 90,000. So we pay the first 90,000, and then after that, we get a percentage of everything after that.
So basically 60, what is it, 62 cents on the dollar is
Yeah.
what we get reimbursed. It's magic, the magic of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I'm hearing is that Stephanie, you're not making a recommendation that we budget at the 60% potential reimbursement, because obviously we're hopeful that we would get closer to the 76% that we've been told we should receive. But it also sounds to me like if we budget at 70%, you're starting the year anticipating $144,000 potential hole.
Until I know what the number is, or once we find out what the budget, if we see that the pot grew, then, I'd be a little more hopeful.
Yeah.
But until as I know it comes out right in January, so every day I check and see when it gets refreshed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing you can do, because then, I mean, what if we went to 60 and then they gave us 76, and I would feel terrible that I took that much out of the, into the budget,
Mhm.
that we didn't need. Not that we didn't need it, but
I wouldn't feel that terrible. We figure
I
out-
wouldn't feel right.
No, I mean, we know you do your very best to get us as close as possible to what
And
our demonstrated actual needs are.
And it varies throughout, because there's actually a spreadsheet going around now through all the districts and asking, do people budget net or gross of excess costs? And there are some districts that do gross, that they just don't include as if they're getting reimbursed, and whatever they get, it just goes into their revenue.
Yeah, Stephanie and I are exploring that. We're actually meeting with the superintendent from the town of Clinton and their business manager to talk about that. It's an interesting idea. I want to know more about it, but I'm not. It might be a little bit of a hard sell in Portland. I'm not sure if it would work here.
Depends on how many outplacements. If you have 22 outplacements and you're doing gross costs,
They may not have as many outplacements as we
that's right.
do.
And surprisingly, some of them didn't. I mean, we seem to have an astronomical high number when we had our regional breakfast, and we were comparing numbers, and ours was high for our population.
Some districts.
For my clarity, I think this is what Sarah had said with that figure around, what was that number that you said we had to reduce? I'm sorry. But so we are doing our own analysis of our children within our own community. We don't have like outside services that do that for us. Is that where you're going with the numbers are being so high?
So are you
now?
talking about how we decide a child needs to be outplaced?
Yeah,
Sure, so there's a couple ways it could happen. The most common,
but overarching, as far as special needs goes, is it the same analysis for special needs as it is for outplaced, or are they two totally separate categories?
so all outplaced students are special education students.
Okay.
The threshold of outplacement is, we don't have in Portland what you need to succeed and to have an education. So number of outplacements is greatly dependent on what you have in your district. That's like a large district like a Meriden is gonna have almost 0 outplacements. They have an enormous amount in-house. So that was kind of what I was referencing of, it's highly dependent on what you have here. If you can educate a child in Portland Public Schools, that's obviously better for a lot of reasons. But if you can't do it, if you're saying this child requires X, Y, Z that we don't offer, or we don't have enough spots for them in this program, or we don't have enough whatever we need to support them, then they have to go out to get it and we have to fund it.
But the assessment of the need is done within our own community, or is it done by an outside
So
service?
most of the time it's done in our own community. The only time it wouldn't happen would be if a student was moving in from another district and they were already outplaced. Typically, we maintain those, or like last year, it was those DCF placements. So children that are in a foster home in Portland, and we kind of incur the cost without much say in how the process happens. But yes, I'd say 99% of the time, it is our team making the determination.
Okay, just going back to what you were saying. Could it be, well, you were saying that our town has a very significantly high amount of outplaced students. Could it be the way that we're doing our evaluations or our
No, because the
assessments?
testing is pretty standard for across the board. There are some students who do have other issues besides the educational component, which makes it costly, I think.
I mean, I
We don't
think,
have the psychiatric component.
right,
sometimes.
again, I would just say it's very dependent on what you have available to you in your district. If you have it available, you give it. If you don't, you often have to look to outplacement.
And we have run mental health clinics and behavior clinics for the last 3 to 5 years and brought many of our students back into house because we could do it for less money than some of the private and outlying programs. So we've done our due diligence, but we're not a full staff, full service behavioral health, mental health institute in public school.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, looking at the numbers, we are, I think, like 1.8% outplaced right now. Most districts are under 1 or right around 1. It'd be interesting to look at districts that are similar to us, like in our DERG, you know, similar resource size.
From
Yeah.
Cromwell schools.
Yeah, so that'd certainly be something I would look into. I will just say, I think the answer really is, it's what you have available. And we've made the investment with our Bridge program, our RISE program, our Harbor program. I think the question, not tonight, but at hand long-term, is how much do we want to continue to invest? And that's, you know, beyond the discussion tonight, but that's what I was referencing in regards to the special education positions, and some of that is just, you know, it is, if you don't have it in-house, you send it out of house.
And the other question is, can other districts team up within an area to provide services that we don't provide, so that we're not going to private facilities and spending higher? And that
There is some of that,
There is.
particularly in transition programs. So that's adults that are 18 to 22. There are districts that are geographically close and they all band together. I went to visit one that is Madison, Guilford, and I think in Clinton, that all run a transition program together. So I've seen it done in that specific instance, or like ride sharing between districts. If we in East Hampton both have a child going to West Hartford, we might split the transportation cost and send them together, but nothing on a large scale.
I think that's gonna be more of a part of the conversation, quite frankly, so that we can reduce the costs. Want to consider, but it's all part of a larger plan that is not gonna happen in this 6-month budget. Not this year.
Other questions, more questions about excess cost? Does everyone feel like they've got a good grasp on that? Are we comfortable taking Stephanie's recommendation to stay at the 70% estimate? Thoughts, questions, concerns? Yeah, I mean, I think, Stephanie, that I agree with you that it's sort of a yes, proceed with caution. And, you know, that makes the most sense to me as well.
And things change, you know, people leave, you know, I watch everything very closely, so, you know, if I make sure I keep a little aside as it happens.
Yeah.
And and what's important to note there is, you know, the evidence of Stephanie watching things as closely as she does shows up in those monthly reports she gives you, right? And she's amazing. She balances them as quickly as she can, but there are lots of unknowns, you know, like the insurance census, like this, like how many outplaced students may move into the district. You know, this is a good budget number to work from. I would be concerned about going much lower. You know, I'm also concerned about going higher for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that, you know, we don't want to be perceived as asking for more than we absolutely need, and we need to be perceived as good stewards and sound fiscal managers, which I believe we are. But explaining the excess costs on Facebook is a difficult thing. Like getting people to understand what that means is complicated. Whereas people, I think, would just hear, oh, you need another $125,000 because you want to lower a number from 60 to 70 or 70 to 60. Well, yes, but if we don't, there's inherent risk. But we do watch it very closely, and you know, when things just start to go out of balance, it requires in some cases some budget freezes or hard decisions that we make as we made last week. But
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask, because you sort of just brought it up, this 4.98%, it's, we can all we are aware, we could acknowledge that it is a higher request than we want to be bringing to our town. I guess I'm curious to hear from you, if the board were to say, we would feel more comfortable at a 4.5. Can you give us a sense of what that would look like and where those cuts would have to be identified?
$120,000.
What is it, about 140?
120.
120, okay. So if you were to say, the board is comfortable with a 4.5%, Charles and Stephanie, go back, rework those numbers by next Tuesday, bring us what those cuts would be, where you would recommend that we make them. That is something we'd be able to do. I would ask for at least, let me get out of my sick head and get into the office Friday and sit down with Stephanie. We could get there. We could 125. Is that what you said, Stephanie?
120.
120. I have some ideas right now. I'm a little on the spot. I wouldn't want to throw them out there this very moment, but that's a number that we could figure out.
I don't know that I'm willing to go down to 4.5. I could go 6.0. Because I think the story to be told is that we have some needs that have to be met. And cutting $120,000 out of an already very lean budget to me, doesn't make any sense. I could not support 4.5.
Charles, this is Sarah. I'd like to see where you would propose to make the $120,000 in cuts, because we know that we're anticipating a referendum coming in May. And my concern is that we're bringing a higher than average increase to taxpayers at the same time that we're bringing likely a sizable referendum to vote. So I think it at least behooves us to see what that would look like.
I can assure you I would have that for you. I could probably put it in an email tomorrow and share it publicly on Tuesday. Again, 125, Stephanie and I will have to take a look. We also know we're opening the bids next week. What day are we doing that? Thursday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
So, after hearing the insurance number.
Right.
You asked me my recommendation of the cost piece.
Yeah. You'll feel better about that after the insurance. Get a little clarity on the insurance.
If it goes higher, then I don't know how we would be able to get to a 4.5 and complete honesty.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, the timing on that is a little
I know.
inconvenient.
Could have done Tuesday.
Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. I'm sorry.
No, that's
But
okay.
the
Angela.
$450,000 that for the duct cleaning and the air quality, that's not in our budget, correct?
Correct. That's separate. That's a capital request, and the capital funding is kept separate from the operating budget or the schools or the operating budget from the town. That's money that the Board of Selectmen allocates separately to maintain maintain and improve facilities.
So if that request doesn't get approved, we're already looking at not helping the quality of the air unless some type of funding comes from state. If there's a grant that's available. That's a sad thing too.
Yeah.
I echo what Sarah says, about not increasing it. I think we should try to be lean and mean because of the referendum. Stacy, Dave, what are you guys thinking?
I say the same thing every year. I've been on here 9 years, so salaries are contractually, benefits, health insurance going up, outplacement is dependent on students. That's 89% of the increase is those three categories that are, if you want to cut from something, then you got to go look for other things. So it's not easy. And, you know, we talk about percentages, but this is $1.2 million at 5%. So I work more with dollars than I do percentages, but it's a big dollar amount, but that's the reality of it. And I don't want to get on my soapbox, but we could have saved some money in overhead if we did done the consolidation, but we are not. So unfortunately, you know, the reality is we're going to have a tax or a mill increase if we go with a 5%. Plus what the town has an increase. I'm sure they have a minor increase as well because they have employees, the benefits are going up and salaries are going up and expenses are going up. So the only thing that we can hope and pray for is revenue comes in higher.
Yeah.
Which,
Well, the other thing is the $465,000 payment that was made in December is the last payment. That money is in the budget. There's money right now in the budget. So where is that money going to be spent?
Isn't there a
We're
payment in
advocating
June?
that it would be spent on capital.
And if it's not spent on capital, I just think from what I've heard from taxpayers and people writing about the need for certain personnel, support personnel, et cetera. That I think the taxpayers, if we tell the story in a correct way, would support a larger than rather a diminished budget. Because they don't want to see services cut. They want their kids to have the best opportunity to have services that they need to learn in the best way that they can. That's our vision, that's our mission. And you know, I'm a taxpayer and I'm retired. I'm living on a Social Security check right now and my savings account. I'm not afraid to pay for public education because that's the future of this community. That's what brings people into this community and they continue to build houses on unbuildable land up in the woods there, with the rocks and all the ledges. People want to come to Portland. They want to be here. And I think they expect that the school will be able to support all learners. I don't see us taking $120,000 out of this budget because we're afraid that the taxpayers won't. And if the capital improvements plan goes through and they fix the schools to the best of our ability at this point in time, then we'll be operating 2 elementary schools and a middle school and a high school. And that will be some substantial savings in the next year or two. So I think the story that needs to be told is we want the best education now. We can't put it off until we consolidate or repair or what. I can't support a decrease in this budget.
I don't know that anyone's advocating for a decrease. I think we're asking for information. Like, that's what I heard. I heard.
Well, we're asking to cut 120 to.
We're asking what that would look like.
Right.
I think it's important for us to know what that would look like and for the community to know what that would look like too.
Well,
You know,
I've said my piece. I don't need to argue any further for up or down, but I've said what I would. I don't even want Charles to go through that process and find out where we're gonna take $120,000 off. Honestly. I think it's a futile exercise. We know where it's gonna come from. It's gonna come from special ed, it's gonna come from support services, it's gonna come from the 0.5 MLL person that, you know, we need. It's gonna come out of the blood, sweat and tears of the staff that's already lean and mean and thin. So that's where I'm at.
On kind of the flip side of where would we put cuts and what would that look like? I think we owe it to the people that have spoken. We got the email today regarding caseloads. If we cut that special ed position, that I would like to know and be able to speak articulately to, okay, by increasing that help to full-time, that means we have to put the budget at what percent? Same thing with that art teacher who spoke tonight, same thing with the special ed teacher. What impact does each one of those have on the budget? Specific percentages. I would like to know the leasing versus buying. My soapbox is technology and screens. And I said it last year, I'll say it again. You can never argue to me. Yes, I know technology makes teachers' lives easier, students' lives easier. They have a time, they have a place. But I think looking closely at our list of how kids are using this technology. I think we could get rid of 10, 15,000 worth of programs that they're using that could be done in other ways, where kids, instead of being on a screen, they can be interacting with a peer, doing more of that back and forth learning versus learning from a screen. So I would like to see where Charles thinks he could ask educators. Yep, we could live without, and I don't want to be the one to say it. But I do think, like Charles said, our younger learners, shouldn't be on the screen. We know, research is out there, what it's doing to our kiddos. So let's be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem with that.
Charles and Stephanie, is it feasible to run those numbers and be able to give us a sense later this week of
So
impacts to the budget?
increasing those positions. But then am I still then cutting $120,000?
I think they're kind of separate questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have a sense of what you're looking for. It sounds to me like, based on this conversation, and I get it, trust me, I think from some of the comments that you've heard tonight that I've made some of the hard cuts in my recommendations too, and I know that's difficult, right? None of these things are easy. Nobody's ever gonna come and make a case that by adding these positions we're doing the wrong thing. It's only when the cuts come that people rightfully so start to speak up, but that's important too. That's what the democratic process is. That's what free speech is. People should, express their opinions about the choices, frankly, that I've made and what positions to cut. But I also, I think, we have to be perceived as fiscally sound. Because we are going out, I'm hoping in May, with some big asks for funding that is long overdue in our elementary schools. They're in rough shape. They must be fixed. I'm very anxious about that, and that's going to be many millions of dollars that we're going to be asking this town at the same time that we're asking them to pass an operating budget. So I hear you. I hear you, but there's no easy answers here. So what I think I will do with Stephanie, and there's no action item tonight. Tonight's just our workshop. I'll bring you a snapshot of what a 4.5% budget would look like. And then I'll also bring you a snapshot of what the budget would look like if we added back the two special education positions, the 0.2 for the health, and increased, what was the other one? Was there any other one that one?
Art.
Art, right. Off the top of my head, I think you'd be seeing something closer to 6.5. But let me look at the numbers and give you a sense of what that looks like.
I mean, I have the numbers, but you both special eds, Charles, or just one?
If you
Start
have
with one.
added both back, let's
Start with one.
So with increase to PE, adding one special ed teacher and increasing art, it would be 5.41.
what would it be to add the second special ed?
And then it's leaving the calculation at 70. That's not dropping it to what it really is.
Or what we don't know what it is. 70 was our best guess when we promised 76.
5.72.
Yeah, I have one quick comment on this. Just, I love the passion of the people that came up and spoke, but we can't be making decisions on people that are making speeches or sending emails. I mean, I depend on a set of administrators over here that are running our buildings. They know what's going on. If they feel it's that important, they should be fighting for it. Not the individual. So they've made decisions that they can live without it, or they can put it in, or if they want to keep it, find somewhere else that they can make a reduction. So I don't feel comfortable in me making that decision. I leave it to the experts.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair though, Dave, each of those positions were included in the in the administrator's requests. And then through the process of whittling down from a 7.5% to get us down to under 5, those eliminations happened. But I do hear you, and
Yeah.
I understand. It's not our job to debate over people, but it is, it's our job to think big picture and to lean on our administrators, and their expertise. I do hear that.
Stacy, I'm curious to hear your thoughts since you haven't spoken.
I am, like, I feel like I could have echoed exactly what Kim said. Picked a great time to come right back into
Yeah.
let me tell you, because last year I think I found myself almost in tears during this budget workshop, exactly for the same reason about, FTEs versus people, people versus numbers, and I get it. And, but I'd like to see, and so that this gives me, what we needed. I need to digest a little bit more.
But I think, and you also asked to see where we could do some reduction, right? But are we thinking that where you've asked for some reduction, it's not significant enough to impact that 5.72 now? Because that 5.72 now is with the added resources that you echoed.
Well, that
correct?
was with 2 special ed positions.
you
If
say
it
2?
were one,
Said any special.
the health and
Okay.
art.
What the team feels.
Right, but where were the reductions? You were saying more in like software?
And I'm back to Sarah's, I would like to know, what are we at 75,000 with the Chromebook? Purchasing, what a lease look like, and can we try to think more creatively about that? With those one-to-one devices, to try to have a good chunk of cost savings there.
Could you just fund half the Chromebooks this year and then half the Chromebooks next year? What would that look like? So only half the class gets the new Chromebooks and half the class doesn't.
I'm assuming we would have to get at the next set at that point, right? Because there's a cycle, so then next year, the next set will come off and you'd have to purchase a whole, this is gonna be a continuing every year purchase now.
Right, but at least it's half of what we're currently asking.
But then you're never gonna catch up, kind of thing. That's, I think, what they're saying.
The result would be if we only purchased half the devices this year, say for the rising ninth grader,
It is a 9.
it would mean that beginning next year, a quarter of our students in 5th through 8th grade would have devices that are out of warranty. Which then become more challenging and more expensive to fix, and the sort of cascade of broken devices and harder to fix. That's my understanding. Is that accurate, Charles?
Yeah, that's accurate. As a matter of fact, by instead of buying a fixed amount, just buying what we need for 5th and 9th graders, that actually cut the number down. The original request for Chromebooks was north of 95,000. And that was to buy enough to have a nice steady supply and inventory. I chopped that right down to the bare minimum we need to start a replacement cycle.
And I'm just gonna ask, but is there, or is it against the law to ask for parents who can afford to contribute towards their child's Chromebooks, or they have how many kids get certain devices already for Christmas or anything like that? I'm just throwing it out there. Is there a way that parents can contribute towards their child's devices? Have we ever thought of asking that, or is that taboo?
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that, Angela, because the law states that we have to provide a free and appropriate public education. That's called FAPE. And that we've determined that these are essential to providing our public education. We therefore need to provide the same way we would a bus ride to school. Some kids, parents buy when they turn 16, they have their own car, or the parents drive them. But we would still owe it to them if they needed it.
What other questions do folks have? Thoughts?
Do we need to have a conversation with Charles about the curriculum manager? You know, I don't know what his thoughts are. Remember he had said that he's trying to be creative about that in anticipation of potentially the consolidation, since we do have
About the
an opening
director-
there. Yeah, the
Director of Curriculum and
position.
Technology. Yeah, Charles mentioned briefly, and I mean, Charles, maybe you should just jump in. I think
Yeah.
maybe he's not quite ready to envision that, but is starting to think about how that position could change in the future. Given the challenges of that position and having curriculum instruction and technology all lumped together.
As with the salary and the insurance and the benefits, I'm not sure what, you know. If there's a
Yeah.
way, I don't know, just to,
Yeah, there
we're
could
in
be.
that spot right now, we haven't hired. Maybe there's a way that we can not hire and.
Right, there's a couple things, Angela, on that. Part of the reason that we haven't run out to fill it right now is because based on the email we received last Tuesday, we moved from a surplus into a deficit, right? And that's one position that by not filling immediately, we are generating some savings, which I feel like we have to do because darn it all, I do not want to have to go back to the town for a supplemental this year. That was not a fun way to end the year, and I don't want to do that again. And we're right on the edge, like Stephanie will tell you, we're right there. We're feeling okay. We might not be in as deep a deficit, but we're not anywhere where we should be comfortable right now. Stephanie, would that be an accurate way to describe our current position?
Yes.
So until we're comfortable, I'm not comfortable recommending that we fill that position right away. That said, longer term, I'll be talking this through with the personnel committee, and of course, we have to, respect that the Teachers Administrators Association has an important role in this discussion too. But technology is a weird thing, and it's kind of an add-on to a director of curriculum instruction and technology. There is no other such position in any other district in the state because of that technology piece. And some really smart people have started to share with me some ideas about how technology might be stripped out of that. And that might then give us some opportunity to reconceptualize the job description, which I wouldn't be doing this necessarily as a cost savings endeavor, although there may be some cost savings within it, but also how do we make the position more manageable? But we have to work on that. It's going to take us several months to get through it, and it should be done separate from the budget development process.
Okay.
Other questions? The thoughts? Seems like maybe this is a good pausing point and that we should plan to pick this conversation up again. On Tuesday. I don't think that there's an intention to take any action tonight. I think that folks need to digest and give some thought and give some answers to our questions. That's fair. Yeah. There are additional questions or additional, thoughts or ideas between now and Tuesday. I think it's been working well to send those emails to Charles. You can share out answers with the full board. Yeah. Charles, any final thoughts?
No, I think I understand what our task is, and this will be an action item next Tuesday.
We hope you feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Please take care of yourself. All right, if that's if everyone's had their say and is ready to take a break, then that's a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Meg. Is there a second? Seconded by Sarah. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Everybody have a good evening, and Charles, please feel better.